Hi, everybody. This is going to be our electron transport chain screencast, just so we can finish up cellular respiration so that photosynthesis makes sense. We're going to start with a little bit of notes real quick, and then I will show you what video to watch, which should help you. So we should probably back it up a little bit and talk about glycolysis and Krebs cycle because it's been quite a while since we talked about it. Please, after this, or pause this right now, go back and look at your notes that we took. I know you all took good notes because we were doing open note quizzes. This process starts with glycolysis, right? In the cytosol, no oxygen, where one molecule of glucose gives you two molecules of ATP, two NADH, these are your electron carriers, and two molecules of pyruvate, aka pyruvic acid, which then all of those materials go into the Krebs cycle to be broken down to get more energy out of those materials, right? Because the whole point here is to get energy out of the glucose and into the ATP. This process will happen in the mitochondria from here on out, right? The Krebs cycle, the electron transport chain. So pyruvate, NADH goes into the mitochondria, and this stuff we can skip over. Blah, blah, blah. And here's our tally, right? So when you have pyruvate from glycolysis going into the Krebs cycle, for each pyruvate, you end up with 4 NADH, which are electron carriers, 1 FADH2, also an electron carrier, and a teeny bit of energy, which is ATP. Now, each molecule of glucose will give you 2 molecules of pyruvate. So if you really want to do the math, every molecule of glucose gives you double this. So 8 NADH, 1 FADH2, 8 NADH, 2 FADH2, and 1 ATP. Okay, this is just a little bit of information to remind you what NADH and FADH2 are. Again, they're electron carriers. They're derived from vitamins. So when we talk about energy production, it's not only the glucose, it's also the other nutrients that are in the food that you take in every single day. Okay, and those electrons are going to be carrying energy. That energy goes into the electron transport chain, which is going to make the bulk of the ATP in this process. These electrons are considered high energy. They're carrying the energy from the glucose to be used to make ATP. Now, this says convert ADP to ATP. Remember, this is adenosine diphosphate. That's basically a used up ATP. This is adenosine triphosphate. So that's an ATP that's ready to give its energy. Okay. This is what we consider the electron transport chain. This is a series of proteins in the mitochondrial membrane that will accept and carry the electrons from these electron carriers, right? So these guys come here and they basically break apart. The electrons that come off of these will go through these carrier proteins. So let's talk about what happens to those electrons. As those electrons move through here, the energy is taken out of them. They basically get used up. At the end of the chain, they leave and they combine with oxygen and hydrogen ions, and they form water. Remember, water is one of the waste products of cellular respiration. So there's your waste product from there. This oxygen is a reactant of cellular respiration, and its whole job, is to pick up these electrons once they're used up and help them to combine with hydrogen into water. It's called a final electron acceptor. Sometimes people will call it a terminal electron acceptor, and it gets rid of all those low energy electrons and hydrogen ions. So we're going to talk next about where those hydrogen ions come from. Now, if you notice, right, NADH, FADH2, the H there and the H2 here at the end were attached to these electrons. So as these electrons get pulled off and sucked through the electron transport chain, the hydrogen ions that they were attached to get pulled across the membrane. Now that is really important because as those hydrogen ions build up, they're going to create a gradient. Do you guys remember when we talked about concentration gradients and cell transport? That's what's happening here. As all these hydrogens get sucked across, it is making a concentration gradient. It's also creating a charge gradient, right? Because all of these are H plus, they're positively charged. So you end up with a positive charge on this side and a negative charge on this side. When you have a situation like that, this is going to want to reach equilibrium. Everything is going to want to reach equilibrium. So this buildup of hydrogen and this buildup of positive charge is going to want, the membrane is going to want to fix that. Okay, now we have this here. This protein is something called ATP synthase. ASE always denotes, not always, most of the time denotes an enzyme. So this is an enzyme and also a transport protein. Synthase, to synthesize ATP. So this is the enzyme that's going to make ATP. This also happens to be an ion channel. So the only way these H plus ions can escape to the other side of the membrane is by going through this channel. Their movement through this channel spins this protein, and it's actually the spinning of that protein that will add a phosphate to an ADP. So this basically assembles the ATP and puts it together. And it's the movement, of all of those ions that moves this structure that creates or assembles the ATP. Here's a nice look at what those totals look like. This is very much an estimate. It is approximately 36 molecules of ATP. About 34 are made during the electron transport chain. But again, that is just an estimate. I'll never ask you guys exactly how many molecules of ATP are produced. What you should know is that this process is the part of the process that makes the most ATP. I really like this diagram. This gives you a nice idea of what is happening and where it's happening. So glycolysis makes pyruvate in the cytosol and a little bit of ATP. Those products go into citric acid, which is also known as the Krebs cycle. That makes a little bit of ATP, but more importantly, sends electrified or energy carrying electrons into electron transport. You can also call this process oxidative phosphorylation. It's a very fancy way of saying giving up electrons to stick a phosphate to something. And here is the bulk of your ATP. Now, since we are going right into photosynthesis or have kind of already started photosynthesis, this is a nice comparison. You see that these equations are essentially the same, but in reverse. So this is photosynthesis. Carbon dioxide, water, energy in gives you glucose and oxygen. And of course, this is the energy of the sun. Here is cellular respiration, oxygen and glucose in, which gives you energy, right, in the form of ATP, and your waste products are carbon dioxide and water. Hey guys, I hope this was helpful. I will post this today. We can chat about it on Thursday, bright and early. Let's also look at this video. I'm going to post this video as well, a musical lecture about the electron transport chain. I hope that it helps.